Okay, take it away. Thanks.
My name is Dan Mummert. I am the wildlife diversity biologist with the Pennsylvania Game Commission for 12 counties of southeastern Pennsylvania. I've been in this position for the past 16 years. And before that, I was the diversity biologist for South Central Pennsylvania for a couple of years. So to me, this is absolutely the best job in the world. I absolutely love my job. The Game Commission is responsible for the conservation and the management of all 400 plus species of wild birds and wild mammals here in Pennsylvania. And as wildlife diversity biologist, I get to focus my attention on the conservation of what are called species of conservation concern. So all the species that are endangered.
And so, I work on bird surveys all across the region, surveying our different species. I have a barn owl conservation project, so getting barn owl boxes up.
In those year after year and banding the nestlings out of those boxes. This time of year, I'm working on this Allegheny wood rat project, where Allegheny wood rats, if you look on the sides of mountains and you see the huge boulder fields that are up there, that's the habitat of these Allegheny wood rats, and they're declining. And so we set up these, you're gonna love this. We have these pieces of PVC tube, okay? Cap them on the ends, but we put peanut butter suet in the middle. And then we put them out into these boulder fields, and we put a trail camera focused on each one of those feeding tubes and leave them out there for a week, come back a week later, and we see what was attracted to the peanut butter suet. And we've gotten porcupine, raccoons. I've had black bears steal some of these. This is in southeastern Pennsylvania, fishers at a couple of them. And every once in a while we get a wood rat, coming to them. Also a couple songbirds. I've had ovenbirds, wood thrush coming to them. So it's really, really cool. Today though, what I'll be talking about is this project that we're working on throughout the region. All about kestrels. Kestrels are declining and they're considered species of concern. And so it's one of the species that I'm really working hard on with this program. This is going to be informal. So, as we go along, if you guys have any questions or you want me to elaborate on something, feel free to say, hey, Dan, slow down. I got a question for you, and speak your mind. We'll stop and then we'll get going after that again. For now though, so kestrels. If I can figure this out.
I think people are seeing questions in the chat.
And I can see the chat.
I'm trying to figure out how to get to the next slide. Yeah, it wasn't letting me.
That is one cool bird.
They know you got a problem.
Now we're good. Okay. Yeah, if you're online on Zoom, you can put questions on the chat and I'll be able to answer those at the end of the session. So I'm seeing the next slide on here, but I'm not seeing the next slide up here.
Just bear with us. We're doing more technical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't the typical format for slide presentation.
And
There we go. All right. All right. We're on to slide 2. All right. Yeah. How much time do you guys have?
All night.
Well, so our focus, of course, being in Pennsylvania, is on the American Kestrel. Throughout the world, there's actually 13 different species of kestrels, but the American Kestrel is the only one we have here in Pennsylvania. It's the only one in the United States. It's really the only one in the Western Hemisphere. All the other kestrel species are in the Eastern Hemisphere. Here in Pennsylvania, kestrels are a falcon. They're one of our species of falcon. There's 3 different types of falcons here in Pennsylvania. We also have the Merlin and the peregrine falcon. The kestrels here in Pennsylvania are the smallest falcon out of those 3 species, and they're also by far the most common falcon here in Pennsylvania. Here is the American Kestrel distribution throughout the entire world. You can see only Western Hemisphere. If you look up in northern central United States into Canada and part of Alaska, in that tawny color, that's where kestrels are only found during the nesting season, during the breeding season. So the summer months, those kestrels all have to migrate south because it's too cold for them at those northern latitudes. You get to this purple-ish color, and including all of Pennsylvania, and that's where that's where American kestrels are found and can be found throughout the entire year. Some of them will migrate south. Some of them will stay, year-round. Here in Pennsylvania, that's one thing that we're learning more and more about is what percentage of our kestrels here stay year-round versus what percentage of our kestrels migrate down south. And some of what we're learning through a lot of what Hawk Mountain is doing is that with telemetry devices and MODIS that they're using, it seems that a lot of the kestrels that we do have that do migrate south, most of them end up in Florida, which is interesting. And then they come back up for the nesting season again. Those areas in light blue, all those are non-migratory and they stay year-round in those areas. But you can see Amazon basin there, no kestrels there, but really found throughout much of the Northern Hemisphere. The American Kestrel, if you look at really old field guides, you'll see that they weren't called the American Kestrel. They were called the Sparrowhawk. And this page that I photocopied, this is from one of my field guides at home, Apgar's Birds of the United States from 1898. And you can see it wasn't called the Kestrel, it was called the American Sparrowhawk. They were called the Sparrowhawk because they were thought that much of what they ate were sparrows and small birds. And through more work, more research, we find that yes, they do eat some small birds like house sparrows, yay house sparrows, but a larger percentage of what they eat are really large insects, so like grasshoppers. I'm sure they had a great heyday with all the cicadas that we had this past year, and they also eat a lot of meadow voles and mice, and they'll eat shrews. So that makes up the majority of their prey. Speaking of diet, this is something that I learned.
I've been working a lot with barn owls, and barn owls are known for these big pellets that they regurgitate. I didn't realize that when I opened up these kestrel boxes, I also found
these little tiny pellets, and that's the same thing. So the kestrels eat, say something like a grasshopper, and they can digest everything except for that exoskeleton. And if they eat enough, they'll eat a couple mice also, and they can't digest the fur, they can't digest the bones, and they can't digest the exoskeleton of insects, and that gets into the skin. And
that's what you see here.
That they then regurgitate as a pellet, and that's what you see.
American kestrels is that how dimorphic they are. The males versus
The females, you can easily tell them apart. And dichromatic refers to the different coloration between the males and the females. And they are highly dichromatic compared to most other raptors. You look here on the left that's a male kestrel with those steel grayish blue wings, bluish head, and compare that to the females with that beautiful pattern of browns and blacks. So easy to tell them apart. They're also dimorphic in that the females, and this is like most raptors, the females are about somewhere around 15% larger than the males.
Here you can also see the difference in coloration between males and females. These are
Here you can also see the difference.
approximately 3-week-old nestlings. The male
Approximately 3-week-old, and on the left, look at the tail pattern with the white band on the outside, black on the inside, versus the females has that coloration of browns and black wings there. So really easy to tell them apart. Habitat for these, I don't want to say barn owls. Sure.
So just a little bit of question. Could they be in Lancaster at the PSL meeting? We were on that walk and I saw that bird go through.
Yeah.
And the only thing, we saw that white band.
Yeah. The white band on the outer tail, that was probably a kestrel. Yeah. Yeah, we were
No, we were talking about,
larger, right?
no, it was the only thing that we could think of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, that wasn't a kingbird though. I mean, that wasn't a kestrel because we were in the woods in that area. And also, yeah, we would be able to know if that was a kestrel versus kingbird. But you're right, that's another bird that has that white band on the bottom of the tail. So habitat for these kestrels, you know, if you're out around in Pennsylvania and you want to find kestrels, what kind of habitat do you want to look for? This here, this is kind of a picture of ideal habitat where you have this wide open landscape, you know, on the landscape level. I'm not talking just 20 or 30 acres. I'm talking farmland after farmland after farmland with open agricultural habitat, typically agricultural habitat, with some sort of grass component.
Usually there's pasture land or hay field, pasture land like this, hay field, or some kind of
pasture land like this, hay field, or some kind of grassland that's not going to be mowed like a lawn on a regular basis. Also some sort of perch sites. When you're in this open grassland habitat, if you look on telephone wires, that's often a great place to find and see kestrels. They're using that as a perch site. Sometimes these trees out in this open
going down into the grass and grabbing a bit of bowl or grass. And then also kestrels, they don't actually build a nest. They don't actually bring a nest to the trail. So
they would either use a large cavity in a tree. So maybe one of these trees that has a large hole, large cavity, that might be good for a kestrel. Or if people are putting out kestrel nest boxes, they'll use that. Population trends for kestrels. This here is a map, United States, since the 1960s and their trends. These are different conservation regions broken up by different habitat types. And if you look at those that are in red, that's where kestrels have been declining over the last 60 years. Those in green, those few areas in green, I think there's only like 2 conservation regions where they're actually increasing in population here in the United States. And in yellow, it's uncertain. There isn't enough information about them, or they're kind of holding steady, not really going up or not really going down. Now, throughout all of North America, the kestrels have been declining on average by about 1.4% each year since 1966. And if you look at number 28 there, which includes southeastern Pennsylvania and along through the Appalachian Mountains, the Piedmont region, they've been declining by about twice the national average, by about 2.6% annually since 1966, and 73% decline in kestrel population since 1966. That includes southeastern Pennsylvania. So that's why I'd like to have this big focus on kestrels in our area. Here's a look at kind of density of kestrels throughout Pennsylvania. So the darker the color, the redder the color, the more dense the population is for kestrels here. You can see, look at Lancaster County, southeastern Lancaster County, very close to the Chester border, has one of the higher densities for kestrels in the state. So very positive thing there. So you can kind of see in those dense areas really correlate well with where the big pockets of agriculture are in the state. So look at like northern Dauphin County, for example. That's a high area for agriculture. Western Berks County, much of Lancaster County, and look at southern Chester County. So good areas for kestrels, good areas for putting kestrel boxes. Why are kestrels declining, and why are they declining so much, here in southeastern Pennsylvania? This is something that's currently being studied. There is no smoking gun, for why kestrels are declining. There's lots of different theories, and these are some of the main theories being studied. First of all, and one that I think certainly has a large impact, is just flat out loss of good habitat. Loss of our farmland habitat. If you look at this picture here, so I'm from Lidditz, in Lancaster County, and I've been there for 15 years, and I'm seeing on the outskirts of Lidditz is farmland, and the outskirts of Lidditz the farms are being sold to developers and are going up into housing projects, just like this right here. This was taken about 7 years ago, this photo, and it's now nothing but houses, only 7 years ago. And that's happened all over Lidditz, and that's just a microcosm of what's going on across the state and what's going on across the country, really. So loss of grassland habitat. And also, if you look at farmland habitat today, compared to 40, 50 years ago, the farmland habitat today is almost nothing but corn and soybean fields, these monocultures. You don't have this diversity of habitat. You don't have the weeds, in the fields. You don't have the crop rotation where there's always fields and fallow. And you don't have the pasture land and the hay fields in the numbers and the diversity that you had decades ago. So that's, loss of agriculture, but also changes in agriculture over the decades. Other changes, possibly lack of nest sites for them. So all this development going on, we're losing the big trees, we're losing the big tree cavities along fields. That might have an issue. Another theory, this hasn't been proven, but this is thought to be a possible theory, is that we've seen the number of Cooper's hawks increasing over the decades, and as kestrels decline. And some people speculate that there might be a correlation there, that the Cooper's hawks are territorially going after kestrels. Hasn't been proven yet. Other issues might be environmental toxins. So possibly rodenticides, all the chemicals being put out onto fields. That might have a large impact on insect population, rodent population, and therefore the kestrel population. Last might be disease. We're seeing a lot of different species of birds being affected by avian influenza, West Nile virus. Maybe there's something there with kestrels as well.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
Sorry to bother you. Can you try and speak closer to the computer, because folks online are fading in and out?
Okay, so closer to the microphone.
Okay.
You know, hold it.
It shouldn't matter, because I thought you were getting farther away from them. So go ahead, carry on.
Or when you turn your head to talk to us, you're actually.
Be. So with this decline, and we know that kestrels have been declining over the decades, but it wasn't until 2015 that the Game Commission added the American Kestrel as being one of our species of conservation concern. And so when they were added as a species of conservation concern, that's when I was able to say, okay, I can start putting some focus on kestrels because they're declining by that much. And so we created this kestrel conservation program for southeastern Pennsylvania through the Game Commission that I'm in charge of for all boxes on private land And my partner in this project is Lauren Ferrari. So she's in charge of management at Middle Creek, if you guys have been over there. And she focuses on the management and collaboration of the nest boxes that are on our state game lands. So we have different things that we're trying to do with this program, learn more about the abundance and distribution throughout the region, show nesting success, how many boxes are active versus not active, and how many nestlings they have the public involved in this through volunteers of all sorts, and partner with other projects, so such as Hawk Mountain's project, trying to figure out why kestrels are declining in population, and through the American Fund's American Kestrel partnership that collects data from all over North America on nesting success in different projects. So I started this project back in 2016, actually. I was doing actually a talk for the Lancaster County Bird Club on barn owls. And at the end of the talk, I said, by the way, the American Kestrel was just added as a species of conservation concern for Pennsylvania, which means, I can start working on this species, and I would like to start doing something, a nest box program for them. And I said, would your bird club like to get involved and help me out with this? And what I could really use are nest boxes. And they said, heck yeah, let's do some nest boxes and get some nest boxes up throughout Lancaster County. And they set up a GoFundMe account that raised $850. And they took that money and built, had raw materials, got raw materials. So all the wood, all the screws, all the hinges. And one of their members was a retired cabinet worker, cabinet builder, and he actually built 50 kestrel boxes out of those raw materials. And then other members of the bird club built another 25 boxes. So they built 75 boxes altogether. And I spent the next couple of years getting them up all over Lancaster County. Then the next county that I went to, and then started monitoring those boxes in Lancaster County, and then that was such a success. So then I went to Baird Ornithological Club in Berks County, and was excited about getting this program into Berks County as well. And the president at the time was Art here, and he was like, absolutely, I'd love to help, and he built 55 of these kestrel boxes. And then other members built others as well. And he also built 5 barn owl boxes. So we got those up, throughout Berks County. And by that time, I was like, okay, I could really use some help with this project. And so had some volunteers who were really excited about monitoring the boxes. And the volunteers just are absolutely vital in this program. Next, you might know a couple people in this shot. Susan here, the next county that we wanted to take this to was Chester County. So we have Bruce here, Susan here, Kathy here, all working together to build nest boxes throughout Chester County. And we got a lot of these up. Susan and Bruce are even teaching people how to build their own nest boxes. Susan converted her garage into a nest box building factory, basically, and has done an incredible job with this project. I also went to a number of different schools in the area and asked if their wood shops, woodworking classes would be interested in building kestrel boxes as part of this project and as a learning example for the students. And several of them built a
number of Eagle Scouts also got involved, getting nest boxes up on a number of our state game lands. And so in total, volunteers have made over 200 kestrel boxes
for this
project that are now installed all over
southeastern Pennsylvania. So when we're looking to place, a kestrel nest box, and if any of you are interested in installing kestrel nest boxes, there's a lot of different characteristics that you want to keep in mind if you want the box to be successful and safe for the kestrels themselves, as well as the people who are monitoring the boxes. So first of all, we talked about having that open landscape, open farmland or open grassland habitat. You have to have that grassland component, so either hayfield or pasture land that's going to have the meadow vole population and the grasshopper population. Needs to be, you want to have the box at least 10 feet off the ground, but not so high that it becomes unsafe to monitor. So the boxes we put up are typically between 10 to 12 feet off the ground. You want to have perch sites nearby, so trees or telephone wires, away from any busy roads. So there's been a couple studies that have been done where kestrel boxes were placed right along busy roads, and they found that those boxes had a much higher level of abandonment by the
parents. So keep them away from busy roads. You want to make sure that the nest box is placed in an area that's going to be safe to monitor.
Just placed in an area that's going to be that has a relatively flat ground next to it. You don't want to have your monitor on a steep hillside, you know, where it's going to be unsafe. They could possibly fall over with a ladder. Also an area where there's not too much human activity nearby. So, you know, it's okay to put them on the sides of barns, but you want to make sure that you ask the landowner, you know, say, you know, you're not going to have a tractor going by this site every day, or you're not going to have too much activity going right by this nest box, because that would also lead to abandonment. And then, of course, landowner permission. So for every one of these nest boxes that we have installed, we've tracked down the landowner and gotten permission to have it on their property. So here's a couple examples of where we've gotten them installed on our different state game lands. So the Game Commission owns large parts.
And those are managed for
wildlife. And so we wanted to expand how many we had on our game lands. And any area that had good habitat, we now have kestrel boxes. And then on private southeastern Pennsylvania, anywhere where there's good habitat. So we try to space them at least a mile apart from each other, so that we can cover, you know, a larger area, and so that there's, you know, no problem with territoriality between the different kestrel pairs. Yeah, it's very dependent upon the quality of habitat in that area. So the research says anywhere between, for, you know, how large of an area they cover, anywhere between about 100 acres to about 1,000 acres. But certainly depends upon habitat quality. Hawk Mountain, in their pamphlet that they give to the public, they recommend spacing them out at least a mile apart from each other. So since last year, 2021, we now have 333 kestrel nest boxes in place, you know, throughout the region, and 204 of those are on different private properties, so different farms throughout the region. 92 of them are on 11 of our different state game lands, and 37 are on other public lands. So, for example, at Blue Marsh, half of Blue Marsh is owned by the Army Corps of Engineers. We have a number of our boxes on their property. We also have a number of boxes on Chester County Parks lands. And this was as of 2021. We now have a little bit more than 400 nest boxes up in the program. So haven't been able to get all the information yet to have this up to date for 2022. Here's the map showing where we have all these nest boxes. So 333 boxes total. In 2021, 119 of them were active. So about a third of them had kestrels successfully using them. Those in red are the ones that were active in 2021. Those in black, the dots in black, are where we have nest boxes, but they were not active with kestrels. So you can see large number in northern Chester, northern Dauphin County, northern part of Berks County, Lehigh County. A lot of that big pocket in Lehigh County, that's Trexler Nature Preserve and State Game Lands 205. That's a lot of those, and you can see a lot of those are active with kestrels. Throughout much of Lancaster County, and you can see that pretty much all over Lancaster County except for this area. And that's because there's another person, Jeff Musser, who he's had his own kestrel program for the last like 20 years, and he has this area already well established with kestrels, and I certainly don't want to interfere with his Chester County, we're getting more and more in Chester County, but you can see that these Kestrel boxes, where we have the Kestrel boxes throughout southeastern Pennsylvania, is pretty correlated with where we still have good habitat for them. So this is where the agricultural lands are.
So the red dots in Chester County, and where is that in Chester?
All the red dots,
Well, the ones that are swatched.
like these here. What is that, south of Coatesville? That's probably south of Coatesville, Doe Run area, Unionville area.
East Mountain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse
So,
me,
yep.
The reason that you don't have any in boxes is because there's somebody else there.
Well, yeah, Devich Probotnik. Do you know Devich Probotnik?
Very well.
Yeah. He has a great Kestrel program in Bucks County, and so I have no interest in interfering with his program. Yeah. Yep. He's a great guy. Whenever I have a question about a rare bird in Bucks County, he's my first call.
I've known him for years.
Yeah.
I knew his father, too. He was an Arab.
I've heard stories about him too. Yep. So one thing with Kestrel boxes is that if you put a Kestrel box up and you don't monitor it, you're very likely to get nothing but starlings, European starlings. And so what we really don't want to have happen with this program is increase the population of starlings throughout southeastern Pennsylvania. That'll be our worst case scenario. So we rely upon, we can't monitor 400 plus nest boxes, and they get monitored every other week through the nesting season. So this is from like mid-May, early to mid-May through the end of June, every other week. So we have a dedicated team of volunteers, more than a dozen now, who are going to every one of these boxes and opening up the box, checking to see what's going on inside. And if there's starlings, eggs or nestlings, they'll swipe it out, get rid of it, and put in fresh nesting material, so fresh wood shavings. So each one of these nest boxes, because kestrels don't actually build a nest, we actually put a couple inches of wood shavings in every one of these nest boxes, and that's done by the volunteers as well. They do that in the late winter before nesting season, and then in May they start checking the box. If there's starlings, they wipe it out. If there's kestrels, they record on a data sheet how many eggs, how many nestlings. If there's nestlings, exactly how old the nestlings are. Because banding of the nestlings takes place anywhere between 14 days old and 25 days old. So we have to know exactly how old the nestlings are to be there at the right time for banding. If there's a native species in there that's not a kestrel, so like occasionally we'll get tree swallows using these. We'll occasionally get a screech owl. I've seen flickers, in one of the boxes. Bluebirds occasionally. Squirrels. Can't forget the squirrels. We have squirrels in some of these. We allow them to nest successfully because they're a native species. Starlings are the only ones that we really have problems with that we get rid of.
Do the starlings come back?
Oh yeah.
Again and again.
Again and again and again. They are certainly our nemesis bird, when it comes to this project.
Dan, could you speak about the starlings and what they do to the box when they take over? Eating out the wood chips, which is really.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the starlings, they will piece by piece take out every one of our wood chips, hundreds of wood chips. And so we have to resupply, certainly resupply every time. So yeah, starlings are a big problem. So we have an incredible team of volunteers monitoring those hundreds of boxes on our private lands. And then for our state game lands, those 90 plus boxes on state game lands, we rely upon our land managers, and they monitor the boxes every other week. Clean out the starlings, record observations, and then the data gets sent to me and a couple of our other banders, and we go at the right time between 14 days old and 25 days old and band the nestlings. So a couple of non-target wildlife that we sometimes come across when we're banding these nestlings. This is, a number of these boxes I'm monitoring as well. And there's this one site that I always have cows, coming up to this box. I'll take the nestlings back to my truck to band them. When I come back, the cows are all over my ladder, and I have to like shoot them away, and they're great fun. Sometimes we have aggressive, the female parents can be aggressive sometimes, and they'll dive down. Nothing like peregrine falcons, however. With peregrine falcons, when I'm working with them, I have to wear full protective gear. So I have the helmet on, I have safety glasses. I work with Dr. Art McMorris, if anyone knows him. He's our peregrine falcon coordinator for the state. He retired recently, but for years, and I'd be his helper. I'd be his broom boy, actually, where we would be up on like places like the Ben Franklin Bridge. Okay, we have a nest box at the top of the Ben Franklin Bridge. We would take the elevator up to the top of that, and my job was to hold the broomstick to shoo away the female that's dive bombing us while he reaches in and grabs the nestlings out. There was the story of the inspector where we had to walk the entire cable length of the Ben Franklin Bridge with broomsticks in our hands so that an inspector could survey the entire bridge because he was getting dive bombed by the parents. That's another story. All right.
Wow.
Okay. So this is what a European starling looks like. So if we don't get kestrels using these nest boxes, or it's not being unused completely, we often get starlings using the boxes. So they have this bluish color, a good bit lighter than a bluebird nest and bluebird egg, and certainly a lot bigger. But this is a starling nest, and that will sweep them out. And this is what it looks like when we have success. So you see the right-hand side there, you see these are wood chips, and those are kestrel eggs. The kestrel eggs are about the size of a medium-sized chicken egg, but they're not quite as elliptical, more rounded, and they're that kind of reddish brown olive in color. And you can see here on the left, female incubating her eggs. And you can see there's not wood chips, there's actually straw. She actually took over the nest of a starling. So that's a starling nest that she laid her eggs on them. Typically, they lay 4 to 5 eggs, and the eggs take 30 days to hatch. And they all hatch within about, they hatch after about 30 days. And they all hatch, within a couple days of each other. Different than barn owls. Barn owls, the female starts incubation right after the first egg is hatched or first egg is laid, and they hatch in the order that they were laid. So there's usually a 2-week difference between the youngest and the oldest with barn owls, whereas with kestrels, it's only a couple days difference. For this first week, the eyes are closed for the first couple of days, and then they'll open a little bit like you see here. They're extremely weak, very altricial, in that they can't take care of themselves whatsoever. They also can't thermoregulate. So the female has to stay with them during this time, as well as incubation, to keep them warm. And during this period, the male is out doing the hunting. So he brings in food for the female and now for the young ones as well. Here's a good example of dad bringing food in. The female, it's an incredible job how she stays there the entire time. Just keeping those young ones warm is incredible. The young ones, after about 10 days, once they're about 10 days old, then they're getting close to being able to regulate their own body temperature. You can see one egg hasn't hatched here. With those young ones being about 10 days old, that egg's most likely not going to hatch. And you see that sometimes. For whatever reason, here at 2 weeks old, that's when the young ones are totally thermoregulating. They can maintain their own body temperature. So now the female can also help with hunting. So both parents are now hunting and bringing in food for the young ones. Look on the side walls of this nest box. This is something that I thought was really different with kestrels too, is that when they poop, when they defecate, they just spray up on the sides of the wall. And if it was a nest, it would be possibly outside of the cavity of the tree. What that does is it keeps the substrate, what they're nesting on, clean, and defecating on the side, it just dries on the wall, and it probably does little to have bacteria grow and parasites because it's drying on the side there. At this age, about these guys are about 14 days old. That's just the age when you can start banding these young ones, because the feathers are erupting from the pin on the primary feathers, and so you can tell the age and you can tell the sex, males from females at that age. Here's a good picture of that. So these guys are right around 14 days old. You can see the feather erupting from the pin on the primaries, and you can see here that this is this bluish gray color. So that's a male versus all browns and blacks on the ends of that primary. So that's a female.
Is this March, April?
This would be May, June. This would typically be either late May, very end of May, but more likely into June. But it definitely varies. So here's mom bringing in a meal here. Here you can see around 3 weeks old, you can certainly see the difference between the females. Look at those brown and black on the wings versus the males with that bluish gray color. And at 3 weeks old, they still have a good bit of down, especially on the feathers and the head. Once they get about 25 days old, they're close to the same size as the adults now. There's just a little bit of down on top of the heads. Otherwise, they look pretty similar to the adults. At this age, they start getting this big, bold attitude, and you reach in. They're usually, when you reach in with a gloved hand, they're often like back on their backs with their talons outreached like this, ready to get you. At this age, we're getting towards the very end of when I like to band. If I were to band much later than this, I might be worried that they would pre-fledge and leave the nest earlier than what we really want. So I have to be really careful when they get to this age. They actually fledge right around 30 to 31 days. That's when they might make their first flights out of that nest. And they'll stick around in the area for several weeks before they eventually disperse to find new homes for themselves. Banding, like I mentioned before, we band the young ones when they're between 14 to 25 days old. 14 days is about the earliest that you can tell the difference between males and females. And when we band, basically open up the nest box, take out the nestlings one by one and put them into, I'll have a cloth bag with me, take that down to the ground level, and I'll have my banding pliers with me. They take a 5B band. So in these bands all have a unique number to them, as well as a telephone number for the National Banding Lab, which is in Patuxent, Maryland. And so down the road, if we were to ever find any of these kestrels, or if someone were to find one of these kestrels that had a band on it, they could call that telephone number or go to the website for the National Banding Lab and say, we found this numbered band kestrel at this location. And then that information eventually gets back to us, and we start learning about how long they live in the wild and how far they disperse. Here's typical banding grip. So when I'm out there banding, usually I'll be holding the bird with one hand like this, and with my two fingers on that side, I'll be able to reach the leg and then put the band on with my other hand. So this is the safest way to hold one of these birds when I'm by myself out there. I'll take a measurement on how much they weigh. So this one's a male, so relatively light. The females typically weigh about 10 to 20 grams heavier than the males here, and they're usually not this calm.
I was gonna say, just the bird, you just put them upside down and
It's usually not that. No, this one was being super calm, so I was like, well, this one's perfect for a photo. Usually I have them in this hat, this knitted hat that I have. So zero the scale, put them in the bag, and then weigh them on there. So if you can see, look at the tail though, and the blue on the wings and the head, and you can tell that this is a male. And this one's somewhere around 23, 24 days old. So nesting success for 2021. So we don't have all the 2022 data yet, but for 2021, we had 119 of our boxes being used successfully by kestrels. We banded 377 nestlings, and that's from 101 of the different boxes. A few of the boxes we didn't get to in time. They fledged before we got to them. And then a number of them were abandoned. So eggs were laid, but for whatever reason, the eggs didn't hatch. A lot of them, the female abandoned for some reason. We don't know the reason for these. And yeah, 2 boxes we just missed because they fledged first. So here again is that map with 333 total boxes. The active ones, successful ones are in red.
Do they ever have a second brood?
I know of one site last year that had 2 broods. So it was one of the first ones. It was the first one that I banded that year. And they had a second that I banded in September, I believe it was. Yeah, they will very occasionally second brood, just like with barn owls. I have this one barn owl site in Lancaster County that consistently has 2 clutches. And it's one of the first ones that I always band, usually in late April. And there's been 2 years ago, I banded the second clutch 2 days before Christmas. Yeah, so imagine, and that bird still had 2 weeks before it was fledging. So that bird was going to be fledging in early January. Those birds, there were 5 of them. And the second time, another time it double clutched, they were fledging in early. One of the main ways that we're collaborating with other organizations is with Hawk Mountain. The woman in the orange hat there at the top, that's Mercy Below, and she's working on her PhD with Hawk Mountain. And she's trying to answer the question, why are kestrels declining in North America? And so she's looking at all those different theories that I talked about earlier, with Cooper's hawks increasing, with toxins, with loss of habitat. And so we're working with her on, over the last couple of years, we've altogether put on 40 radio transmitters on our kestrels. And you can see here, see that little antenna sticking up? It's a little backpack radio telemetry device. And then she has interns that are tracking the movements and seeing what kind of habitat these kestrels are using throughout the nesting season, throughout the year. We are also taking, altogether over the last couple of years, we've taken over 80 blood samples from 80 different nestlings. And we're having those analyzed to see if environmental toxins, such as rodenticides or pesticides, are a possible problem for these kestrels. Also doing habitat assessments. So studying successful nest boxes versus unsuccessful nest boxes and seeing if there's what differences there are in the habitat characteristics around those nest boxes on the microcosm level, like close by the box, as well as landscape level, large areas around the box. This was her second year with this project. It was her last field season. So in a couple of years, over the next couple of years, she'll be analyzing the data, and hopefully she'll come up with some answers. Why kestrels are declining. Another big thing with this project is just, whenever I have kestrel boxes up on these different properties, I love inviting the landowner to come out and watch the banding. Having the families come out, having groups of kids come out and watching some of these banding demonstrations. If we can get the public interested in wildlife, interested in conservation, and show them all the stuff, all the great work we're doing, hopefully they can get excited to help conservation of these declining species as well. And with that, any questions? Yep.
If the clutch fails, will they recast?
Yeah, so total clutch size is typically 5, typically 4 or 5 eggs. they can have a second clutch. So if they abandon the nest early, I've seen them try again. You know, if I know that it's completely abandoned,